everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to use some new eyeshadow palettes that I got from NARS. They were kindly gifted to me. They are part of the new Orgasm collection. We have Orgasm X and just the Orgasm palette. Both are absolutely beautiful. This one is definitely geared towards a darker look or darker skin tones. This one is for kind of like fair to medium. So as you can see, this one is the Orgasm X and this one is the Orgasm palette. This one is a bit more of a pinky hue, the other one is a bit more neutral. It's kind of like the light and medium version of the palette. I think I'm going to use a mix of these tones today. Not sure how it will look. It will be on screen for you now so you can see what today's tutorial looks like. Yeah, so let's get on with the tutorial. I finally have my hands back on the Luminous Silk Foundation, which I used so much last year. I love this foundation. It's a favourite of mine. The shade I have is 625, which is a little bit darker than my skin, so don't panic when it goes on. It's to match the natural tan on my body, where I've had my face covered from a hat and sunglasses. So this will bring my face up to speed, and I will put a little bit of a concealer to lighten the very centre because this is a little bit darker. This is one of my all-time favourites. It is a medium coverage. It's the most natural dewy foundation that I find doesn't make me look excessively oily, and it doesn't make any of the areas of my skin look dry or sit in the pores oddly. It really is, for me, my ultimate foundation. So this comes in a ton of shades, so whether you're fair, medium, dark, they literally have you covered. The actual foundation was based on silk, so the idea is it's to mimic silk. It really does sit like silk on the skin, it's beautiful. If I apply this with my hands, then I only use one pump. When I use a sponge, I tend to go through a little bit more of it. It does absorb into the sponge, so it is a bit of a waste. However, I would definitely recommend doing it with your hands because it's not a cheap foundation, and then that way you're not losing any of that product into the sponge. We've got one layer and we're 3 pumps in, so that gives you an idea of what the sponge actually absorbs. Just going with your hands because it is so much more cost effective. Now remember, my skin on my face is a different undertone at the moment to my body because I've got no base colour. So the foundation will always look slightly different to my body until I've applied bronzer, concealer to lighten if it's necessary, and finished everything else on the face. But once you apply foundation, initially it can look a little bit off. For concealer, I'm going in with the Too Faced Born This Way Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer in the shade Nude. I love this because it really is full coverage, but when you use a sponge, it kind of dampens it down a little bit. It takes away that super full coverage finish. It's not too drying. I really like it. It's definitely one of my favourite full coverage concealers. And because we've got a medium finish on the rest of the skin, I'm going to use this just to conceal the areas that need a little bit more coverage. If it's an area on my cheek, for instance, that I don't want to be lighter, then I would use a colour that matches the foundation rather than a colour that's going to brighten. This one is just for brightening. So a little bit just here. I'm not going right up to the under eye because that's the area that can be slightly liney, and it just settles into those areas. So avoid it initially and then you can bounce it up. There's only a very light layer on that area. And a little bit on the forehead. The centre of the face is the area that kind of like this little golden V shape, which will be the area that should be the lightest. When I bounce this over the top, I like to lift it upwards. It makes the face look slightly lifted and a bit more youthful. This is another aspect to the face that can start to look a little bit unusual until you've got the rest of your makeup done. Taking a tiny amount of that concealer on a brush and popping it on the inner corners where the area is slightly darker because it sinks in. We want to brighten it, even if you don't have much of a colour difference in terms of if it's blue, purple, or if it's actually just flesh toned. Once you've got this kind of more full coverage base, that area will look slightly darker. So you do want to go in and lift it. It doesn't have to be with this concealer, it can be with a lighter version, but go in and lift that area and it will make the world of difference to your face. As you can see now, my skin looks nice and bright. It looks youthful, even more awake. Just tap over everything with your sponge so everything is perfect and well blended, and there's no little streaky marks, no seams that you've missed where the concealer meets the foundation. I'll zoom you in so you can see the finish of this foundation because it really is beautiful on the skin. So this is before we've powdered. The skin is still kind of settling with the foundation. We will start to get some creasing under the eyes, but we want that to happen first so that we can start working that into the skin before we set it. But overall, I love it. Pores look practically invisible. You're always going to see some sort of surface to the skin. That's natural. You want that, otherwise you won't look human. But overall, I really love it. I'm going to flip over to voiceover while I do my eye makeup, talk you through the process, and then I'll be back to finish the skin. So to fill in my eyebrows, I'm using my Urban Decay Brow Blade in the shade Cool Cookie, which is one of the tiniest pens I've ever used. It's really, really good. The hairs at the front of the brow are a little bit more sparse, so you'll be able to see that I am taking it up ever so slightly higher than where the hair is visible at the front. But as you can see, it is completely in line with the rest of my eyebrow. Once I filled in the very front section, I then changed the direction that I'm mimicking those brow hairs. These hairs tend to grow down in this direction, so I am following that by creating tiny little hair strokes. And then for the tail of the eyebrow, I come down to a nice point, keeping it very soft and natural. So as you can see, we have a before and after, and it's so natural. So here are both the eyeshadow quads up close. This is the Orgasm X, and then we have the Orgasm Original. Both are relatively neutral in shade, however Orgasm X is definitely a little bit pinkier in hue. So starting out with the Orgasm palette, I am taking the matte shade, which is a matte coral, and the brush I'm using is the Anastasia Beverly Hills A25 blending brush, and I'm working this directly into the socket of the eye, and I'm layering this twice just to build up the colour intensity. Then I'm taking the same shade underneath the lower eyelashes and just making sure to connect that with the outer corner of the top lid, as I always say, because this frames the eyes. Then we're going to kick this up a notch by going into the Orgasm X palette and taking the Dusty Rose matte shade from this palette on a small crease brush and working that in circular motions slightly lower than the first shade that we applied and blending it into that shade. If you didn't have the coral shade underneath, then this would be a lot pinkier. It just kind of adds a very subtle peachy tone underneath the eye, giving it more dimension, but it's up to you. You don't have to use both palettes. Going back to the Orgasm palette, I'm mixing together the light pink champagne and the golden shimmer, and on a small detailer brush I'm buffing that onto the arch of the eyebrows to the highest point, and then dusting the excess powder down to meet the eyeshadow, and then I'm also taking that on the inner corner of the eyes. I can't tell you how beautifully creamy these shimmers are. They're not frosted, they just kind of melt onto the skin and just give this beautiful high shine reflective finish. You'll see when I move my eyes around that from the front they don't give a white cast, and it really does catch the light incredibly. I'm now taking the sparkly amber shade from the Orgasm X palette, and using a damp flat shader brush I'm pressing this onto the inner third and the outer third of the mobile lid, leaving a little space in the centre. Then back into the Orgasm palette and this shimmering light cocoa colour, using the same flat shader brush, again with a slightly damp finish to it. I'm pressing that directly onto the centre of the lid and then using a tapping motion to blend between this shade and the sparkling amber shade that we've already applied. This comes out a tiny bit darker than it appears in the actual palette. So for that reason, I'm going to go back in to the golden shimmer shade on a small brush and pat that directly on the centre of the colour that we just applied. Just so it's a little bit more dimensional, it'll catch the light when you turn your eyes and it makes that part of your eyelid look a little bit bigger. I've purposely kept out of focus here just so you can see that kind of shimmer that you can see in real life that the camera doesn't pick up. I'm now going back in with a small amount of the Dusty Rose shade from the Orgasm X palette, and I'm just redefining the socket area, deepening that shade. Now eyeliner is completely optional. We're going to be applying some eyelashes, so having eyeliner really does help to kind of disguise where the seam of the eyelashes starts. So I'm applying my Wet n Wild Megaliner in the dark brown shade, and then I'm using a small brush to buff over it so it is a little bit softer. I'm going to keep the liner soft all the way along the lid, and then with the wing that I'm creating now, I'm going to keep that a little bit more defined. This would still look great with the liner in a more rounded shape. You don't have to create a wing, it just depends on your eye shape. Then I'm going in with this dark brown coffee pencil by MAC, and then some mascara. The one I'm using is the Marc Jacobs At Lashed Mascara. And then on my top lashes I popped on some Ardell Double 113 Wispy Lashes. To take it up a notch and make it more of a lashy look, I'm taking these tiny individual lashes by KASHA lashes from Canada. These little clusters come in different lengths, and each tray gives you 3 wears, obviously depending on how many you apply and which lengths you use. As I said, they do come from Canada, so they did take, I think, maybe 2 months to arrive, but they made up for it by sending me some glue. I finished with the eye makeup. I've gone super lashy. On the skin, I'm going in with the matte bronzer by NARS. This is in the shade Somoa, and I'm going to dust that on to sculpt the face. So I'm using a big brush to get this on. I'm doing it in a 3 shape. So around here, on the cheeks and on the forehead. As I explained in a previous tutorial, what I like about this particular bronzer and the shade is it's got a slightly red undertone. I've got a little bit of colour on my body and it is a little bit warmer than my actual face. Where there's no base colour to my skin, the foundation gives it a bit more of a yellow feel. So having a bit more of a red undertone to the bronzer makes it look more like freshly tanned skin. I'm not going to put any blusher on today because we've got quite warm colours on the eyes. I'm just going to use the bronzer instead. Otherwise, there's a lot of pink going on the face. Take your sponge and just press over that bronzer so it pushes it into the skin. It looks more like one with the skin rather than a powder that you've just pressed on top. I'm going to take a little bit of the highlight shade from the palette and I'm going to apply that just a little bit down the centre of the nose and the top lip. The idea is that this will catch the light. We're not trying to get a Tin Man nose. Tap it off, but just to catch a little bit of light. And the same on the Cupid's bow. I want to keep the lips super natural, so I'm going in with this Cremesheen glass by MAC. This is in the shade Bebe, which is a peachy tone. I know we've got a pink tone on the eyes, but I'm not a massive fan of pink on the lips, so I'm just going to go with this. It will kind of be a bit more of a nude. That's much more up my street. However, if you are a fan of pink, if you're a fan of lipstick, lining your lips, we do still have quite a bit going on the eyes with the lashes, so lining your lips might make you look a little bit full on, but you do what makes you happy. I know some of you will like a lot more going on the face in terms of really sculpting the cheeks, but I feel like having that kind of bronzed feel to the skin, but it's not super heavy, not super contoured, it looks a bit more natural and still a bit more wearable and just a bit more achievable. I really hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial using some of the new products by NARS. I think they're really, really pretty. Again, I know that eyelashes won't be for everybody. However, you can still create the look with just mascara. You don't even have to apply eyeliner. You can apply a cream liner along the waterline. It's completely up to you. Let me know what you thought in the comment section below. I would love to know your thoughts on the palettes and the overall makeup look. I am always inundated with questions about my hair, so next week I have a hair tips video coming for you, so stay tuned for that. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please give the tutorial a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you are new to my channel. All the products I've used will be listed and linked in the description bar below, and I will see you next week. Bye!